This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the news, world events, politics, the world of science and technology, even the worlds of entertainment, and we take a look at it from a higher perspective, a spiritual perspective, if you will, if you don't mind the S word. And what I mean from that perspective, if you've listened to the show before, you understand my perspective on this. It's not a religious perspective at all. It's a spiritual, or you could even call it a metaphysical perspective, which is looking at these stories that we are creating in the world, what they are telling us about ourselves, what we can learn from it, and how we can use it to awaken, reconnect, affirm that which we really are, what the truth really is, which is that we are all connected, we are one, we are, I like using the term divine mind, that we are timeless, that we are at our core, at our essence of who and what we really are, indestructible. So looking at it from that perspective, looking at it from the perspective of these things that are happening in the world, being sort of holograms that we are creating to, in a way, entertain ourselves. I know it sounds odd, but it's because it's more than just entertainment. It's experiencing things. It's kind of hard to explain in words, but if you can think of it that way, if you can think of us as the essence of us as a sort of eternal being or consciousness, and that we are at the metaphysical level able to create anything, then the things that we are creating are things that we create for the same way that we create movies or stories or games or beautiful pieces of music or beautiful pieces of art. They are expressions as well as validations or even tools for that reconnecting that I was telling you about. So, yeah, that's why I do what I do here, is to focus on these issues that we talk about, we hear in the news, we deal with in our everyday lives. And many of these stories, much of the information that we get bombarded with on a daily basis can make us feel out of sorts, out of control, can push all of the buttons that make us anxious, make us sad, make us angry. And to take a step back from that is to take control of it rather than to have it feeling like it controls you. I think that's a healthy thing. That's the wellness portion of this, is that I think that these are tools that help us to stay healthy emotionally, and also healthy in mind and spirit and body, all of those things. I had a week this week where, again, I got a little out of sorts over things I was hearing in the news, things about the election and the government and the possibility of gridlock and all of these things, and the Democrats losing so badly in the past election, and the Republicans winning, and all of this, uh, which I, have been much better at keeping control of. But this week, for whatever reasons, it pushed the buttons, and I let it. And I learned from that, though. I learned from that. I went into that rather than to fight it. I went into all of those feelings and came out the other side of it, understanding much more than I did before about how this is really something we are writing. We are creating this. This is a drama that we are creating. And we are doing it for, I think, a variety of reasons. But as I took that step back and I looked at a bunch of other things that are happening, I'm going to talk about this in the show today. A bunch of things that are pointing us in the direction of change. I ended the show last week talking about the fact that we have this, as I've been talking about for a few years now, this astrological alignment between Uranus and Pluto that has been affecting events on a large scale since 2012 and will continue to do so through 2015. And I also then postulated that this will trigger a change, a sea change, which may include things like, as many people, many experts have been predicting, another huge crash like we had in 2009. And I believe that, I think it's Tom Hartman who calls it the crash of 2016. But this will be the catalyst for really making the changes that will help the planet and help us reconnect and do the things that many of us want to do in the world. And along with that, I came across some information about climate change that's happening. And that also is something to throw in the mix as a catalyst for these changes that I'm talking about. So we're going to talk about that. The theme this week of the show is global awareness. And that seems to be the theme of the week in the world of politics and news. There have been quite a few major developments. One is on the global warming front, because President Obama announced an agreement between the United States and China to really focus on climate change and bringing down the carbon emissions. This is historic because both of these countries, China and the United States, are by far doing the most to the environment. And they also have been the two countries that have been the least willing to step up and make agreements and promises to change their ways. And so this is a moment when both countries have come together to say, yeah, we're on board. So that makes it more of a global issue than ever before. And then also there was this week the G20, which is a gathering of 20 nations around the world, and the focus on that is the economy. But global warming factored into that this year because more and more it's understood that global warming not only affects the economy and the economies of all these countries. You don't have an economy if you don't have a planet. And so there is that to think about. So there was some talk about the global warming issue at the G20, but it still was mostly an economic summit in which these countries agreed to. I believe they want to raise their GDP, their growth, by about 2% each country. That's their pledge to try to do. It's more of a wish, I think, than anything that is something that will happen for a lot of these countries. And I've talked about the economy from a spiritual perspective before. And to get back to that a little bit, I'm not an economist, but from what I understand, what people talk about when they're talking about the economy is based on growth. The economies of these countries depend on growth. Growth depends on being able to provide something, do something that will increase productivity, produce jobs, will be something people will put money into and pay for, and so forth and so on. And that requires basically going into the commons and taking the commons and making it something that you monetize. What do I mean by the commons? Well, the commons is basically the fact that everything belongs to all of us. Okay, water, electricity, earth, air, all of those things belong to us. The land belongs to us, to everybody. So what growth depends on is taking those things that are in the commons, say land, and now you monetize it. So you say, I can sell this land, or I can buy this land, and that creates economic growth until you run out of land, or until you're just shuffling around the same land. So the more we sort of raid the commons, the more that we need growth, the more we raid the commons to try to find things that you can use to stimulate the economy. So one of the commons now that's used are our ideas. You sell ideas. You sell a song. A song that comes from nowhere in particular, and perhaps everywhere. As a songwriter, you write it down, and then you claim it as your own, and you sell it, and others sell it to try to make money from it. The song really doesn't belong to the songwriter in any real sense, but because that particular songwriter or songwriters were able to capture it in a way and claim ownership of it, they can use it to make money. Well, as we've seen, in recent years, that whole idea through things like the music streaming services that we have now, many of which are free, and the internet technology we have now, much harder to sort of claim ownership of anything, in order to make money from it, which is why the record industry has been in such turmoil all of these years. It's kind of returning that back to the commons. And this returning to the commons of things, I think, is a trend that will continue. because we can't sustain uh, our idea of growth in the world. There's only so much growing that we can do. When we reach a point where I think we're probably at that point now, where growth is, really reached its limits, then we have to rethink how we are in the world, what we value in the world. And that's where our economy changes. I think we're on the brink of changes like this. I think we have to be on the brink of changes like this. And issues such as global warming are going to be sort of lightning rods for it. There's a book out that was written by the author of the Shock Doctrine, and the Shock Doctrine being Naomi Klein's book about how the free market creates these crises moments in order to get more from the commons and put it in the hands of an elite few. And the wars and crises of the past 40 years have been all about doing that. In this book now, she's talking about how global warming may just be something that we can use to completely change the way we do things and make this a healthier place for everyone and a more prosperous place for everyone. So, very interesting kinds of ideas here. I noticed also there was and this didn't get as much attention as it should, but as we're in this global awareness phase here, there was a report called the Global Nutrition Report that came out. And this Global Nutrition Report has basically said that the world itself is, except for the country of China, most countries in the world are facing serious malnutrition problems and health problems as a result of malnutrition. So, what did they mean by malnutrition? Well, it's not just, not eating. Malnutrition means either undernutrition, where you're not eating the right things, or overnutrition and obesity, which we have in this country. So malnutrition just means bad nutrition. So Dr. Haddad, I apologize for that. It's Dr. Haddad, Lawrence Haddad. He is part of this research group that put together this report. And what he's seen from the data is that nearly every country has crossed what he calls a red line on nutrition, in becoming a serious public health issue. So nutrition disorders are numerous, and they can be caused by insufficient intake of food or an insufficient intake of certain nutrients. It can also be caused by an inability of the body to absorb and use the nutrients. And it can be caused by overconsumption of certain kinds of foods. In which case you have obesity. And we're seeing this, we've long had a focus on this with children in this country, but it's happening all over the world. Every country in the world is grappling with malnutrition, according to this report. So, here again is another opportunity to change how we feed the world, how we deal with things like food. So they had a meeting, and I guess the meeting actually was last year about this, but this report is coming out now with new data. The data is not timely in that it's about 5 years old, according to what this report is saying. And that it's better data is needed, apparently, is what they're saying here. But among the things they've agreed to doing is ensuring that at least 500 million pregnant women and children under 2 years of age are reached with effective nutrition interventions. And these are targets there to be achieved by 2020. So that's one. Another is preventing at least 20 million children under the age of 5 from being stunted from lack of food or lack of nutrition. And saving at least 1.7 million lives by reducing stunting, increasing breastfeeding, and treating severe acute malnutrition. Now, of course, in many countries in Africa and in Asia and areas of Asia where there's extreme poverty, of course, you have a huge problem in malnutrition. But it's also, as this report mentions, a problem that exists in wealthier countries where people overeat. So, these are the things, this global awareness, global warming, global nutrition, global economy, these are the things, these are the opportunities that we have in front of us to create, or recreate, and make changes before the changes become inevitable, which they are. But we always have the opportunity to jump in there and seize the moment. And that's always a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And the more aware we are, the more we can talk about it, the more we can focus on it and just put energy to it, the more things will happen in a positive way, so that they don't have to happen in a way that is, some might perceive as catastrophic. So that's good, okay. And then the other thing in this whole global idea or global awareness thing actually comes from the entertainment world, a movie that was released last weekend called Interstellar, which stars Matthew McConaughey. It's an amazing science fiction movie, and it is, I consider it to be, a spiritual film. Many of you, or some of you may know of my work, talking about spirituality in film, and my documentary on the same subject. This is something that I would add to that group of movies. It's it is science fiction. It's quite a bit wonky in terms of the science involved. The director, Christopher Nolan, who is famous for things like Inception and the Batman franchise, went to great lengths to be as accurate as he could about the science without interfering with the storytelling. And I think he did a tremendous job with it. Interstellar is about a future Earth where things have fallen apart, and there isn't need for anything more than food. So almost everybody is a farmer, because the world needs food more than it does anything else. Much of the population's been destroyed, and those that have survived are perilously close to, starving. So, whatever kind of careers that you might have dreamed of as a child, when the crises of Earth hit, they had to be abandoned, and everyone had to focus on farming. And Matthew McConaughey is one of those people. He was a pilot for NASA, but of course had to give that up to be a farmer. Until one day his daughter notices something very strange, which she initially thinks is poltergeist activity, but it appears to be a change in gravitational pull, which leads to Mr. McConaughey's character being led. Something is communicating to him. A consciousness is communicating to him, and he's led to discover something extraordinary that's been going on. And to talk about it too much will be to give too many spoilers, but suffice it to say that he finds NASA still exists, and he finds a program that is underway to find a new home for the people of Earth. And he is asked to pilot a ship that will explore that possibility. But what really makes this a spiritual film, it goes beyond just the science of it in a way that films like 2001 have done. And it explores consciousness. It explores our consciousness. It explores our evolution of consciousness. And again, I don't want to give away spoilers here, but suffice it to say that it is something that I found very inspiring when I left. There have been complaints about the soundtrack, which is rather loud and rumbly in certain parts of the movie. So if you do go see it, you might want to be aware of that. You might want to sit further back in the theater or protect your ears or what have you. But you shouldn't let it deter you from going to see this. It's an amazing, amazing film. So, and the thing that is most amazing about it is that this is something that quite seriously we could be thinking about, given the global warming, the global malnutrition, all of the things that we've been talking about on this program. It's less science fiction-y than some might, write it off as. Well, I was going to add to that a hero of consciousness who actually is an astronaut. His name is Edgar Mitchell. And Edgar Mitchell was an astronaut on the Apollo 14 mission, and was one of the few men who had the opportunity to walk on the moon. And that experience changed his consciousness. But we're running out of time here, so I'm not going to have a lot of time to talk about him. We'll talk more about Edgar next week, but basically he was trained as an engineer and a scientist, and then he had this experience that radically altered how he viewed the world. And he became aware of consciousness itself as being the unexplored territory that science either couldn't delve into or had little interest in delving into. I think the latter is more of the case than the former, but we'll talk about what that incident that occurred to Captain Mitchell and his relationship to Edgar Casey and psychics and psychic awareness and all of that stuff. That's been a topic for the past couple of weeks. We've been talking about that. I think you can't talk about consciousness without talking about psychic activity, intuition, all of those things. So
he's definitely someone to think about. Quite controversial, as are all of these people. People who are continually called frauds, uh, dismissed, but what they've done, their work, the validity of it, and the science of it can't be dismissed. So, anyway, I have to go. So, until next week, keep your global awareness open. Go see Interstellar.